Hello and welcome to the Best Life Podcast, where we here at Altra Federal Credit Union are helping you live your best life. I'm your host, Tony Byer. Thank you so much for tuning in. And today we're talking about one of the biggest and most important purchases one can make in their lifetime, and that is owning your own home. Now, while it's exciting, stressful, and something that typically appreciates and grows in value, it's important that we protect our home and what we do through homeowners insurance. So now more than ever, we never know what's going to happen to our home or what can happen inside of it with weather, fire, flooding, hail damage, wind, theft, Godzilla attack, who knows? So not only having homeowners insurance is important, it's also crucial to make sure you're not underinsured for when the unexpected happens. So to help us navigate all of this and understand what we should know about homeowners insurance, we have a couple of guests on the podcast. We're fortunate to be joined by Sarah Smith. She is the Director of Public Affairs for the Wisconsin Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. Thank you for joining us, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, we're glad you're here. And we're also fortunate to be joined by Jennifer Robaczewski, who is an Escrow Specialist here at Altra. Thanks for taking the time to be on the podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning.
Good morning to you as well, Jennifer. Well, Sarah, we'll start with you. Right off the bat, we wanted to talk about the basics of homeowners insurance. What is homeowners insurance, Sarah, and what would a policy typically cover?
You know, the largest single investment most people make is in their home. So it is really important for people to understand what their coverage is and what it is not, and make informed decisions about that homeowners insurance coverage. So in general, you can protect your home with an insurance policy that covers your possessions, certainly the property itself, you know, the structure and maybe some ancillary structures depending on the policy that you have, and as also your liability. So we'll get into some of the details on that. But in general, there are 4 types of coverage kind of under the umbrella of a homeowner's insurance policy. That's the dwelling and personal property, personal liability, medical payments, and additional living expenses. So the dwelling and personal property is pretty straightforward. I think that's probably what most people think about when they think of what, homeowners insurance does for them. And that's, damage to the home, damage to personal property, those sorts of basics. The personal property coverage pays for your personal belongings within the home. So that's your household furniture, clothing, electronics, like other personal items that you have. So there's kind of a pro tip associated with that. One of the things that I do is use the NAIC Home Inventory app or just take photos, but kind of regularly take stock of what you have physically in your home, especially as we're coming up on the holidays here and people are getting a lot of new things, maybe even some new expensive things. Just having a photo even of your living room or of your family room that shows the new, sound bar and flat screen TV and things that you've purchased is helpful potentially if you need coverage later for that personal property. Your homeowner's insurance policy will also cover off-premises coverage. So that means that the policy will cover your belongings, even if they're not physically in your home. So people may think of, like if they have something in their car and it's stolen out of their vehicle, your homeowner's insurance may kick in there, but potentially also the cost of replacing your suitcase if they're stolen on vacation, for example. Those are things people might not think of, but are important kind of facets to having homeowners insurance policy. And then, as I mentioned, they'll also provide some personal liability coverage. So that's if there's injury or damage that's caused by you, a member of your family, or your pet. So that's whether or not it happened on or off your property. And then the medical payments coverage would cover, reasonable medical expenses if someone outside of your family was injured at your home, regardless of fault. And finally, the additional living expenses coverage pays for reasonable and necessary expenses if you have to live somewhere else for a period of time. If you have to move into a hotel or an apartment temporarily because there are repairs being done to your home for a covered loss of some kind, like a house fire, that can also be covered by your insurance policy.
Wow. So it's a lot more than just your home that goes along with all this, and excellent information. But, understand every policy is going to be just a little bit different. So, it's important to work with your agent and everything like that. But I didn't know about some of the travel things that you mentioned. So that is a great idea. And also taking inventory and doing that regularly. All the things that are in your home, even some of the new stuff that could be happening right now. I mean, we are right here at the holidays. So Sarah, when it comes to homeowners insurance, Let's talk about a standard policy. What types of events or risks are typically included in a fairly standard homeowners insurance policy?
So, homeowners insurance was created originally for house fires. And I think that's the thing that people, again, kind of think about first, that there is a house fire that even causes a full, total loss of the home or some significant damage to the property that needs to be repaired. That was the impetus for creating homeowners insurance as a product, back in the day, and definitely still one of the key important pieces of having homeowners insurance. Some of the most expensive claims that come in are due to house fires. I mean, as people can imagine, it's not just the damage to maybe the wall where the electrical fire occurred, but it's the smoke damage that affected every one of the rooms that was near that wall. So there are a lot of those things that come up that, can be really expensive if you don't have the right policy. Again, thinking about kind of where we are seasonally, those old twinkle lights that you pulled out of the attic that you've been using for 20 years, they might spark a fire on that dry Christmas tree when you forget to water that a little bit later. This is one of the most common seasons for some of those house fires that happen. It's those lights, it's candles, it's space heaters plugged into a power strip. Some of those things that people may not think of or that they've gotten used to doing. It just takes one spark, one incident to cause a fire like that. But there can also be severe wind events, hail events. Those are things that often cause a lot of damage to siding, to roofing. Your pipes could freeze and burst, and maybe you're out of town because of the holidays and there's a power outage and those pipes burst. That can be something that can be really expensive, and your homeowner's insurance is there for times like that so that you don't have to take on all of that financial burden yourself. One of the things we always talk about is insurance being kind of part of the stool of financial planning. And it's often one people don't think about as much or maybe think of as financial planning. But if you're putting all this time and effort, and I hope that you are, into your savings and your investments and creating a plan for the future, those things could be derailed if you have an $80,000 house fire, which is the average cost of a claim for a fire-related event. That's an amount of money that you might have to pull out of your investments or drain your savings accounts to cover if you don't have the right insurance in place. So insurance maybe seems like an upfront cost that may not always be worth it, but when you do that math and add up what those monthly premiums cost you, it's a good deal. And it's important for people to have that coverage in place because it's really there for those unexpected events, those weather related events, those things that can happen in your home that can potentially cause you a lot of money otherwise.
Yeah, and those are things that you don't even expect or you don't even know that's going to happen. And having that peace of mind, and like you said, Sarah, $80,000 for a fire-related event, that would be very, very significant. And like you said, that would be a big chunk of what you're saving for, taking money out of investments. And we certainly don't want to do that. And that is why home insurance is so important. So Sarah, I was hoping that you could explain a little bit the difference between the replacement cost and the actual cash value when it comes to homeowners insurance and coverage.
Yeah, this is a really critical piece for people to understand when they're looking at their policy and talking to their agent and making those decisions about what they can afford and what type of coverage they want. So replacement cost is essentially the amount that it would take to replace or rebuild your home or repair the damages with materials of a similar kind and quality. So it's not deducting for depreciation. So I think something that people will think about pretty often is like a roof. That's a large expense. That's something that they're familiar with people having damage and needing to use an insurance policy to cover. And roofs can last, decades, 30 years. And so when you think about the depreciation of that, the value of those materials after 30 years is quite a bit less than it was when it was first put on. And a replacement cost means that depreciation doesn't matter. Your insurance is going to kick in as per the terms of your policy to cover it at a replacement cost level. Most homeowners insurance policies contain replacement cost coverage on the home and then actual cash value coverage on your personal property. So the actual cash value does take into account that depreciation. So that's something like, if you had a $500 chair that had a lifespan of 20 years and it's destroyed after 10. You have a house fire, smoke damage, or something like that destroys the chair. The actual cash value is much less than $500 because it's halfway through its lifespan. So that's, your insurance is not going to give you the full cost of $500. It's going to give you less than that to replace the property that was lost. But you can talk to your agent about those two pieces, kind of whether your replacement cost value or your actual cash value would be applied to your property itself or to the home itself, and kind of shift those things around. You can see a big difference in your premium cost if you were to move to an actual cash value. But then there's the risk to that, of course, of knowing that you might be on the hook for more money later. But those are all decisions people have to make. Everyone has a different monthly budget. People may be facing a tougher time one year than they were previously. And those are important conversations to have directly with your insurance agent about what opportunities and levers there might be to pull. And replacement cost or actual cash value are one of those first places that people look.
Yeah, and talking about having that coverage, which is so incredibly important, working with your agent, like we mentioned, and having homeowners insurance, it is required for a home loan. And to talk more about that, I wanted to bring in Jennifer Robaczewski here from Altra. Jennifer, in your work as an escrow specialist, what are some of the common pitfalls, or what should people know about their home insurance if they have a home loan with Altra?
Well, with the homeowner's insurance, it's important to have your dwelling coverage match or exceed what your loan amount is. We want to make sure that that's covered at Altra. And then replacement cost coverage, too. That is what pays to rebuild your home. And it's not just your depreciated value. So it's a little different, but we require 100% replacement cost to rebuild that home as it was on there. And then there's pitfalls if in cases where say you have a home that's $500,000, but it was insured for only $100,000. That means that the homeowner is 80% self-insured, which means if a disaster strikes, you're on the hook to rebuild your home for most of that cost. There's also a lot of escrow confusion, which is where we kind of specialize in on that. If you have a loan-to-value ratio is over 80%, escrow is required on your home. So most mortgages have an escrow account with homeowners insurance. There's deductibles also with that. The requirement is at or under the 5% of the dwelling cost coverage, but Altra does also have a guideline as a maximum deductible of $5,000 on home insurance and flood insurance. And that is because we wouldn't want you to have to take out another loan if should a disaster happen.
Yeah. And we don't want to put the member in a bad spot. If something was to happen to the home and all of a sudden you've got this huge, bill, replacement costs, everything like that. And that's why, those guidelines are there. And talking a little bit more about escrow, we did cover that on a previous episode of the Best Life podcast. That was episode 25. We talked about escrow analysis and understanding and what to expect when it comes to that. Jennifer, a big takeaway is working with your agent. We are not in the business of directly providing home insurance, but if people had questions about their escrow, make sure insurance, property taxes are getting paid. How can they get a hold of you there in the escrow department?
For Altra, it is always important to communicate any changes that you make with your homeowners or flood insurance to the Altra escrow department. We can be reached at escrow@altra.org, or you can call 608-787-7500 or 800-755-0055, extension 7500, and we will be happy to help with your changes. It's just important to note that Altra does need your authorization before we can make any updates to the home insurance and flood insurance, and that's for your privacy and protection.
That's great information, Jennifer. And we'll have all of that in the show notes here for the podcast for your reference. So we are getting here toward the end, and we really appreciate both of you taking the time to be here. So Sarah, I'm going to come back to you. Tell us a little bit more about the Wisconsin Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, and how can consumers get a hold of your office?
So our office's mission is to educate and protect consumers with a strong insurance market. So we sort of regulate the companies on one side, but also serve the public on the other side. So we can be contacted at any time. We have a form even for just a general insurance question. You may not have a complaint or an issue, but you would like to understand something you received in the mail, some new complexity to your homeowner's insurance policy or some other type of policy that you don't understand. And we want to make sure you make informed decisions. We're not agents, we're not going to be able to tell you whether it's right for you to take a certain approach or what the best option is for your needs, but we can explain insurance concepts. We can answer questions about what insurance issues you may have encountered. And we can also investigate complaints. So if people do have an issue with their insurance, their agent, if they've been filed a claim and had that claim denied and they feel that it was denied improperly to the terms of their policy, if their coverage was non-renewed and they don't feel that they had sufficient notice of that, those are some of the things that we are able to regulate under state law. So you can contact our office by visiting oci.wi.gov/complaints. And you can also call us at 608-266-3585 for us to investigate that complaint and see if there's any action that we could take under our regulatory authority.
That's excellent information. And the Wisconsin Office of the Commissioner of Insurance, along with Altra, we're here to help. So we really appreciate both of you making the time to be on the Best Life podcast to help our listeners understand some of the ins and some of the outs of homeowners insurance and why it is so critically important. Thank you both so much.
Thank you again for having me.
Thanks, Tony. It was a pleasure to be here.
On this episode of the Best Life podcast, we spoke with Sarah Smith, who is the Director of Public Affairs with the Wisconsin Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. And we also spoke with Jennifer Robaczewski, who is an escrow specialist right here at Altra. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Best Life podcast, brought to you by Altra Federal Credit Union. We appreciate you taking a moment to learn how you could live your best life. If you have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover, send me an email at tjbuyer@altra.org. And who knows, it may even make it into a future episode. Don't forget to follow the Best Life podcast pretty much wherever you get your podcasts, or find it on our website at altra.org. Thanks again, be well, and we'll talk to you again soon.